Please welcome David Hogg, activist and survivor of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school shooting in Parkland, Florida.
Hi guys, how are you doing? Actually I want to start this out with a moment of silence because there's a young activist that worked in Chicago on the South Side to prevent gun violence there that died last night. He was a 19-year-old and his name was Del Monte Johnson. And he's been working on ending gun violence for years now, and he was shot and killed last night in Chicago. So can we please just take a moment of silence, not only for him, but for all the unrecognized victims of gun violence around the country and the world. Thank you. Silence is one thing that I think we hear a lot of the time from people that shouldn't be silent, because people buy their silence. And the people I'm talking about are people like Governor Rick Scott, Senator Marco Rubio, and President Trump. You know what would be great right now is if we could take all the anger around this brand, Nike, that I'm proudly wearing, and push that towards police brutality. As we all know, silence equals death. And what we're hearing right now from our politicians is silence. My question to Marco Rubio, Rick Scott, and other elected officials is, why were you silent after Pulse? Why were you silent after so many tragedies that happen every day in this country? Silence is what I'm hearing from the media, especially when marginalized communities of color, and especially the trans community, is heavily affected by gun violence. There's one person that I want to bring up just because so many people don't know what these communities go through. And one of these people is Diamond Stevens. They're from Mississippi, and they were a trans woman of color that was shot in the back of the head and crashed their car recently. And nobody knows their name because the media misgenders them, police misgender them, or their family even misgenders them. And that's unacceptable because any form of violence is violence. Violence anywhere is violence everywhere, and we have to work together to end it. Silence is what gun violence in the undocumented community sounds like, because the truth of the matter is, if you live in the undocumented community and you face gun violence or sexual assault or discrimination, you're not going to go to the government to fix it, because if you go to the government, you're more likely than not going to be deported. When I have friends on the west side of Chicago that are undocumented and they've seen their friends get shot, what happens is they get shot and they get taken to the hospital. 2 days after they come out of the hospital, ICE shows up in unmarked cars in plain clothing, basically kidnaps them and deports them. And I'll tell you right now, that is not how you build trust in communities that need you more than anything. It's ridiculous. And on the topic of people that are undocumented, my question to the government right now is, who is illegal on stolen land? On the topic of indigenous communities, they face an incredible epidemic of suicide within their communities. And if we want to start talking about gun violence and mass shootings, the first thing that we have to recognize is that one of the first mass shootings was the Battle of Wounded Knee. Now I'm going to talk about standing up in times of tragedy. Sadly, many of us know what this is like because so many of you are amazing activists from this community and we're all part of this club that really nobody wants to be part of a lot of the time because we're all here for horrible reasons. Reasons that shouldn't exist because these problems should have been taken care of. But because of the silence that's bought and paid for by our politicians, nothing changes. But things do change because you guys are the change. Nobody else stands up. None of the elected officials stand up unless you force them to. Because you, as their bosses, remember, they're not politicians. They are public servants that are put there to serve one person, and that is you. Remember that. After the tragedy occurred at my school, my sister was crying so much that I couldn't stand silent. She'd lost 4 friends, and I had never heard her crying like that in my life. She was a freshman in high school and was 14 years old at the time. This is what gun violence in America looks like. Gun violence in America looks like an issue where our politicians are so owned by the NRA that we've got to, our elected officials, our public servants that are put in place there to protect us are killing us. Because, just think of this, right, just for a second. We're more angry and outraged at a flagpole in a movie or at a pair of shoes than we are about police brutality or gun violence or HIV/AIDS or discrimination or incarceration of our youth. Why? I want to tell you one story. Earlier I heard the name Nia Wilson brought up. That night I was in Oakland. I was in East Oakland. I was talking to youth activists in East Oakland about how to end violence in their communities. And I was talking to one girl who I prefer not to name just because she's been through so much and she asked that I not. But she's lost 20 friends to gun violence in the past 5 years. She's 18 years old. And at the time I was speaking to her, it marked essentially the 1-year anniversary of her being homeless. Her stories are not told. The same night that we were talking about gun violence in her community, I went outside for 10 minutes and heard 3 gunshots when I was with the kids, and they didn't even react. And that same night, right after that night, the next morning, I get a call from her saying that her friend Nia Wilson just had her throat slit on the BART subway, a block away from where we were. Violence is happening every day in all of our communities across America, and we must work together to end it. The only way that we're ever going to be able to work together, though, is if we can put down our partisan divides and our divides within each other and putting each other into different categories. No matter if you're trans, gay, lesbian, or bi, we have to work together to solve all of our issues because we are all here to fix issues for each other. Don't let our politicians divide us. Don't let ourselves divide us. We're here to fight with one weapon, and that is love. And at the end of the day, no matter what community you come from, the biggest lesson that I've learned is no matter who you are, where you come from, or where you stand on any of these issues, the biggest thing that you can do, quite simply, is just listen. Listen to people and understand and use your platform, if you have one, or no matter how big or small your platform is, speak for yourself, don't speak for others, and hand each other the mic using your platform so they can speak for themselves because you don't know what anybody else has lived through. So thank you guys so much for having me, and let's continue this fight. And please recognize the insane amount of gun violence that our trans community faces every day across America, whose stories are untold and continue to be untold, and be the voice for them when they can't. Thank you.